Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. This group of 6 all had extraordinary cultivation bases. After saluting Bai Xiaochun, they offered their names and stated the levels of their cultivation bases. 4 were in early core formation, 1 was in the mid-stage, and 1 was in the late stage, the latter being one of the young women. Her name was Lu Li. She was pretty, with phoenix-like eyes set in a young face. Despite her youthful appearance, she was buxom in a way that her armor couldn't hide. In fact, her armor had been crafted in a way that made her look good-looking, and even heroic. Bai Xiaochun was the lieutenant of the squad, with Zhao Long and Lu Li being the next strongest, and his immediate subordinates. Already, their group was strong enough to shake almost the entire Middle Reaches cultivation world. Furthermore, from what Bai Xiaochun could tell, this group of 10 were all friends with each other. Presumably, they had met in some other part of the army and got along quite well. Most likely, they also had the ability to form and operate a spell formation. With their combined power, it would probably be possible for them to tangle with someone in the nascent soul stage, and if not defeat them, at least cause them quite a headache in battle. As Bai Xiaochun sized them up, they were doing the same to him. The truth was just as Bai Xiaochun had suspected, they had long since been a small team. Zhao Long's suggestion, plus the fact that they had personally witnessed the pill furnaces exploding on the other side of the wall, convinced them that becoming followers of this mysterious apothecary would be a good thing for them. Unfortunately, now that they were actually laying eyes on him for the first time, they were a bit let down. Not only did he seem quite young, but there was something that made him seem somehow untrustworthy. Bai Xiaochun gave a few words of explanation about his requirements and then, considering that it was already evening, gave them the rest of the day off. From this day forth, they would live in his courtyard, and would be responsible for carrying out all of his commands. During the night, the fighting still went on outside of the Great Wall. However, because of the spell formation shield, Great Wall City itself was very quiet. Bai Xiaochun sat quietly in his residence, looking at this lieutenant's command medallion. After a moment, he sent some divine sense into it, and once again felt the connection between himself and the huge eye on top of the pagoda. At the same time, he branded the medallion with his life sense, causing it to flicker with violet light. Moments later, he was able to see his accumulated battle credit. 43,753? He murmured. Lieutenants are pretty impressive, but if I could become a captain, it would probably be even more impressive. Then I could command 100 cultivators. Filled with anticipation at the thought, he decided to check the requirements to get a promotion to captain. 1 million? His jaw dropped. That's way too much, he thought, frowning. Then, he read further into the matter, and his frown deepened. There are different rewards for exterminating vengeful souls than there are for killing savages. And you get even more battle credit for taking out soul cultivators and necromancers. At this point, his eyes began to shine. Well, no need to get antsy. I can get battle credit by just making exploding pill furnaces, right? Doing that is a piece of cake. It all comes down to soul convergence pills. If I could concoct a truly powerful soul convergence pill, then I could rake in a whole bunch of battle credit with almost no effort. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Bai Xiaochun felt more excited than ever. Of course, battle credit was good for more than just getting promotions. Therefore, he decided to check what items were available for purchase. All you had to do was go to the tower and meet the requirements of the eye, and then whatever you wanted was yours. After a moment of silence, he murmured, I really don't have enough battle credit at the moment. With that, he decided to check his cultivation base. I'm not too far from being at the great circle of the gold core stage. Sadly, the spiritual energy here is too weak. It won't be very easy to speed up my cultivation that way. If I got enough military credit, though, I could easily get my hands on some cultivation resources. After some thought, he sent some divine sense out to confirm that no one was in the area watching him. Then he produced a handful of paper talismans which he set up around his residence. Then he guiltily opened up his bag of holding and pulled out some earth spirit tubers. The earth spirit tubers were completely golden, and were covered with countless ringed lines which could be used to determine their age. Each tuber had more than 100 of them. They're all more than 100 years old, he thought, licking his lips. The truth was that, although he did need these tubers to concoct soul convergence pills, he didn't need very many. The reason he had requested 1,000 of them, as well as certain other precious medicinal plants, was that he planned to secretly keep a few for himself, and use them to increase the power of his chi and blood, and also strengthen his life force. After all, life force was key to cultivating his undying live forever technique. With these earth spirit tubers, my undying tendons should advance by leaps and bounds. Even a single 100-year-old earth spirit tuber would fetch an astronomical price if sold publicly. In fact, in auctions, they would usually be classified as precious materials of heaven and earth. In Great Wall City, only someone like Bai Lin would be able to acquire so many at the drop of a hat. Bai Xiaochun could only imagine how he'd done it. A huge price must have been paid to get the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect to part with 1,000 of them. With such thoughts on his mind, he looked around again to make sure that no one was spying on him. Then he took one of the earth spirit tubers and performed a spirit enhancement using his turtle walk. After all, he had also requested fuel for numerous different types of multicolored flame. Almost immediately, the earth spirit tuber was even more extraordinary than it had been before. Unfortunately, he only had enough fuel to enhance a few more. When he finally gave up, he picked up one of the spirit-enhanced earth spirit tubers and took a bite. He suddenly felt like he was right back in the ovens, causing his heart to swell. I wonder how eldest brother is doing back on Sky Quarter Rainbow, he thought. Suddenly he recalled everyone he knew back in the river-defying sect, such as Li Qinghao, Hu Xiaomei, and Song Junwan. All sorts of memories floated up in his mind. At the same time, he felt his life force surging hotter and hotter until it was like a fire. He immediately began to work with his undying live forever technique, causing the undying tendons in his left leg to become like a black hole, sucking in all of the heat. The night passed quickly, during which time Bai Xiaochun consumed the entire 100-year-old earth spirit tuber. Anyone else who did something like that would find their life force surging with incredible vitality. But Bai Xiaochun was different. His undying live forever technique almost seemed like a bottomless pit. Thankfully, the undying tendons on his left leg were almost complete, and he was even beginning to develop his right leg. Soon, he could sense that his fleshly body power was increasing with incredible intensity. When the light of day spread out, he began to concoct medicine again. This time, he didn't fall behind at all, but instead, increased to 50 batches. Thanks to the constant testing, he was making some progress toward a more powerful soul convergence pill, and yet, was not pleased with the results. So far, nothing seemed to have reached the ultimate level that he knew was possible. However, he wasn't in a hurry, and was convinced that his tests would soon lead to a complete success. Besides, with every day that passed, pill furnaces continued to detonate. As far as Bai Lin was concerned, everything was going great. In fact, at one point when Bai Xiaochun was worried that he would run out of pill furnaces, Bai Lin had a whole new batch delivered. General Bai had long since fallen in love with the exploding furnaces. To him, they weren't tools for concocting medicine, they were weapons to harvest vengeful souls. As time went by, Bai Xiaochun continued to work on his cultivation. Eventually, he found that he had gone through so many earth spirit tubers that he only had a few dozen left. That night, his entire right leg seemed to burn with incredible heat, and to pulse with incredible power. Rumbling sounds echoed out, causing everything in the area to shake. It worked, he thought excitedly. As of this moment, he could sense a terrifying fleshly body power radiating from both of his legs. In combination with the undying hex, he was confident that not even a nascent soul cultivator could catch up with him now, at least not without using a minor teleportation. Bursting into motion, he sped to a location 3,000 meters away in his courtyard, and by the time he had come to a rest and was standing there, the sound of his movement still hadn't reached his ears. Faster than the speed of sound. Elated, Bai Xiaochun threw his head back and laughed uproariously. The sound of Bai Xiaochun's voice echoing out in the courtyard attracted the attention of Lu Li, Zhao Long, and the others. Expressions flickering, they all rushed out to see what was happening. As soon as they approached, they could sense the powerful fluctuations in the air, prickling against their skin, apparently the result of something passing by with incredible speed. Then they saw Bai Xiaochun off in the distance, laughing uproariously, and they gasped, exchanging glances of astonishment and disbelief. All of them could tell at a glance that Bai Xiaochun must have been testing out some new technique, something that involved moving with incredible speed. Lu Li looked at Bai Xiaochun a bit more deeply, then murmured to herself, who would ever have thought that Apothecary Bai would have a secret magic like that. She, along with Zhao Long and the others, all clasped hands in salute. Bai Xiaochun was quite pleased to see the astonishment in the eyes of Zhao Long and the others. Clearing his throat, he gave some words of encouragement regarding a few things, then strutted back into his residence. Zhao Long and the others were significantly affected by what had just occurred. Days later, they would still think back to what had happened, and feel their hearts trembling. That was especially true of Lu Li and Zhao Long. Being in late core formation, they felt especially taken aback. That speed, it couldn't just be a secret magic. It would also require shocking levels of fleshly body power. With unbelievable speed like that, an ordinary fist strike would be like a divine ability. As time passed, Bai Lin continued to collect pill furnaces, which he would send over the Great Wall to explode on the battlefield. Each explosion would rouse the hearts of the 5 legions. That was especially true considering that the power and effectiveness of the exploding furnaces increased every day. Of course, that made them only that much more of a headache for the Wildlands savages. The pill furnaces mostly targeted the vengeful souls, and didn't just converge them together in one spot, but rather, wiped them out of existence. The destructive power of the explosions ensured that the once boundless sea of souls outside the Great Wall was slowly showing signs of weakening. Were it not for the fact that this campaign was backed by 10 tribes of savages, as well as soul cultivators and necromancers, then the souls would most likely have already dissipated. The Wildlands were in a very tight situation at the moment, and couldn't think of any good strategies to turn the tables. Of course, they had no way of knowing that it was all due to the fact that Bai Xiaochun was now working for the 5 legions. On one occasion, Bai Lin took Bai Xiaochun up to the wall to experience for himself the power of the exploding pill furnaces. Of course, that was only after Bai Lin swore up and down that there wouldn't be any danger at all. As soon as he set foot on the wall itself, he could sense the countless gazes of the cultivators of the 5 legions, gazes filled with respect and awe. Bai Xiaochun immediately fell in love with the sensation. Being in the center of the public eye made him feel very much like a true hero. From that day on, whenever Bai Lin came to take the pill furnaces away, Bai Xiaochun would go along to witness the explosions. When he saw the blasts of energy, and heard the deafening booms, it lifted his spirits to the maximum. Furthermore, with each explosion, the battle credit in his command medallion rose higher, which got him even more excited. This is definitely the place for me. Bai Xiaochun looked out at all the craters beyond the Great Wall, the infuriated savages, the recoiling sea of souls, and swished his sleeve. With a single massive snap of my finger, he mused proudly, I can destroy anything and everything. An entire month flew by, during which time the sea of souls continued to grow thinner. It was something that had not occurred for many years, and got the cultivators in Great Wall City into very high spirits. Conversely, the Wildlands forces were now paying closer attention to the situation than ever. I have over 300,000 battle credits. Bai Xiaochun murmured. Every day, he would check to see how much his battle credit had increased, and was always pleased with the result. From what he could tell, he was definitely making enough to sustain his cultivation. One afternoon when Bai Xiaochun had just sealed 50 pill furnaces, he didn't stand there watching them like he usually did. Instead, he swaggered out of the armory and headed toward the huge pagoda in the middle of the city. Not only did that pagoda operate the city's grand spell formation, it was also where the 5 legions would go to spend battle credit. Therefore, it was a very important place. It was only natural that a place like that was also the dwelling place of a diva. Generally speaking, cultivators from the 5 legions could be seen coming and going there on a daily basis. As soon as Bai Xiaochun showed up at the pagoda, people recognized him. All of them seemed to view him favorably, and would salute him with clasped hands. Bai Xiaochun called out greetings in return, sighing at how popular he was. Upon reaching the pagoda itself, he sent out some divine sense to check what items were available for purchase. It was in that moment that cries of shock rose up around him, and a bright beam of light appeared up above. That light shot down with incredible speed, surrounded by a frigid coldness that was shocking on a deep level. It's Ji Feng. Of all the cultivators in the great circle of core formation in the 5 legions, he's the one most likely to get promoted to Major General. Ji Feng, I haven't seen him for a long time. I heard he was sent out on a secret mission outside the Great Wall, to infiltrate the Wildlands and gather intelligence. As the discussions went on, the beam of light faded away, and a young man appeared, clad in a blood-colored suit of armor. He had long black hair, and a handsome face that was marred by a long scar which ran from the top of his forehead down to the corner of his mouth, and transformed his good looks into something grotesque. As he hovered there in midair, he completely ignored everyone around him as he stared up at the huge eye atop the pagoda. Down on the ground, Bai Xiaochun looked up at Ji Feng. He didn't recognize him, but something about the strength of his cultivation base reminded him of Zhao Tianzhao. He must be a famous person like Zhao Tianzhao, he thought. Ji Feng had terrifying cultivation base ripples, and a murderous aura that was more powerful than anyone Bai Xiaochun had seen in the 5 legions other than Bai Lin. And considering that Bai Lin was half a step into the diva realm, that was very telling. A fiendish killer, Bai Xiaochun thought with an inner gasp. Although Ji Feng seemed intimidating, Bai Xiaochun wasn't convinced that he would lose to him in a fight. After all, fiendish killers like this guy were usually the crazy type. Just when Bai Xiaochun was about to look away, Ji Feng waved his hand in the direction of the huge eye. That motion caused a vast quantity of vengeful souls to pour out of his sleeve. There were more than 10,000 of them, screaming and struggling. However, once the gaze of the eye locked onto them, they were sucked up, and in the blink of an eye, had been absorbed. Bai Xiaochun's jaw dropped. Simultaneously, expressions of astonishment could be heard in the area. Elder brother Ji Feng just offered a sacrifice of 10,000 vengeful souls. Not many people increase their battle credit by offering a sacrifice in such a way. Only top experts like Ji Feng can pull off something like that. There were more than 10,000 vengeful souls, but in terms of quality, they were varied. I'm afraid his battle credit will only increase by a few tens of thousands. Even as the discussions continued, Ji Feng turned and blurred into motion, speeding off into the distance. As for Bai Xiaochun, it was only at this point that he finally realized you could earn battle credit in such a fashion. What a pity. Right now, my exploding pill furnaces simply tear the vengeful souls to shreds. If I could use Ji Feng's method, I could earn even more battle credit. Sighing, he shook his head. After giving a final glance to Ji Feng disappearing in the distance, he poured some divine sense into his command medallion, establishing a link with the huge eye. A moment later, all sorts of information appeared in his mind. I can't believe you can trade for so much stuff here. They even have nascent soul pills. Considering the shocking fact that nascent soul pills were for sale, then it was no surprise at all that they had the type of medicinal pills that could help during the gold core stage. There were also magical items, paper talismans, and medicinal plants of all types. Bai Xiaochun's heart was already pounding with excitement. Many of the items were unique to this location, such as soul grasses from the wildlands, and even underworld river water. The underworld river was illusory in nature, almost like something that belonged to another world. It had very unique properties and was difficult to summon. In fact, other than devas, no one could manipulate it. Underworld river water. Although Bai Xiaochun wasn't sure what that type of water could be used for, he could see that a single drop was extremely expensive. Obviously, it was something very useful for cultivators. Perhaps cultivators want underworld river water, the same way wildlands soul cultivators want heavenspan river water? Although Bai Xiaochun hadn't been at the Great Wall for very long, he had heard that in the wildlands, heavenspan river water was extremely valuable. Because of that, quite a few people would smuggle it out into the wildlands to trade with the soul cultivators. Although the practice was strictly forbidden, it was impossible to prevent it from happening altogether. There was even a black market within Great Wall City itself. However, Bai Xiaochun wasn't interested in that. What he was interested in were nascent soul pills. He quickly found the listing for nascent soul pills, and when he saw the price attached to it, he couldn't help but gasp. Earlier, he had assumed that he had a good amount of battle credit built up. However, after seeing how expensive things were, he felt really bad for himself. Nascent soul pills cost millions of battle credits. Looking sadly at his violet identity medallion, he sighed. After all, nascent soul pills had other uses than just breaking through to the nascent soul stage. They served the general function of increasing one's cultivation base level, and therefore, could also be used to break through to the great circle of core formation. The reason for that was that the main way nascent soul pills helped with breakthroughs was by means of providing power through the medicinal ingredients. However, only some of those ingredients were specifically for the purpose of forming the nascent soul itself. At the moment, what Bai Xiaochun cared most about was the extra power the pills could provide. One pill. With one nascent soul pill, I could probably get to the great circle of the gold core stage. At the moment, Bai Xiaochun had to give up on the idea of purchasing a nascent soul pill. Instead, he bought some other high-grade medicinal pills useful for the core formation stage, as well as some magical items he needed, then left. After returning to his residence, he sealed the place thoroughly and then took out his turtle walk and performed 6-fold spirit enhancements on everything he had just purchased, as well as some other items in his bag of holding. After he was finished, he looked hesitantly at the numerous designs on the objects he had enhanced. I only have 2 sets of 7-colored flame fuel, and 1 set for 8-colored flame. That's all Bai Lin could give me. Back in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, he had tried to track down fuel for various levels of multicolored flame, but hadn't been successful. At that point, he had come to understand that 7-colored flame fuel was possible to find, but when it came to 8-colored flame fuel, it was very rare. It had probably been difficult for Bai Lin just to get this one set. After a moment of thought, Bai Xiaochun pulled a jade box out of his bag of holding, opened it, and examined the contents. Inside was a fingernail-sized stone that initially seemed completely ordinary in nature. However, it was possible to sense a shocking power within that stone, power that could be unleashed by the smallest bit of friction. That stone was none other than 8-colored flame fuel. After studying it for a bit, he carefully closed the lid of the jade box and shook his head. I need to hold on to this 8-colored flame fuel, he thought, and only use it on a really good magical item. After putting away the 8-colored flame fuel, he began to consume the medicinal pills he'd just enhanced. As he did, spiritual power began to course through him, transforming into strands of frigid qi that gathered inside of his gold core. Another month flew by. The higher Bai Xiaochun's cultivation base grew, the easier it became to concoct medicine. He continued to produce successful batches of soul convergence pills, and although he wasn't very happy with the outcome, the final versions continued to improve compared to his original version. Bai Xiaochun was certain that it wouldn't be long before he would be able to produce a satisfactory soul convergence pill. Furthermore, he had decided that the best option was to wait until he made a significant improvement before presenting the pill to Bai Lin. By now, Bai Xiaochun was very pleased with his life in Great Wall City. Not only did everyone respect him, but the pill furnaces being constantly tossed over the wall and exploding among the enemy caused his battle credits to increase on a daily basis. His exploding furnaces were now one of the deadliest weapons at the disposal of the skinflayers, and were a source of great pressure for the Wildlander necromancers. Were it not for the fact that this was a large-scale assault, the Wildlands forces would have long since retreated. Whenever Bai Xiaochun went out to personally witness the devastating effects of his exploding furnaces, he could sense that the fighting was continuing to intensify. By this point, it wasn't just a single savage tribe who was participating in the offensive, there were now 6 of them. Before, there had been about 10,000 savages on the battlefield, but now there were around 80,000. It had been many decades since a battle this large had been fought in the war. Whenever the savage giants roared and charged into battle, all heaven and earth would shake violently. Furthermore, more and more soul cultivators were showing up to fight. The cultivators of the 5 legions took them very seriously, and would often send out their most powerful experts to contend with them. However, the soul cultivators were always under the protection of large groups of savage giants, and although a few of them were successfully taken down, they never went out without a fierce fight. Both sides ended up suffering casualties, although it was generally worse for the Wildlands. After all, the 5 legions had the Great Wall to protect them, and most importantly, the exploding pill furnaces were wreaking havoc on the mostly unintelligent vengeful souls. Were it not for the pill furnaces, the vengeful souls, who didn't fear extermination at all, would have posed a huge problem for the 5 legions. By this point, there was virtually no one among the forces of Great Wall City who hadn't heard of Bai Xiaochun. Also, his name was spreading outside of the Great Wall as well. Many of the savage tribes were now aware of who he was, and that the magical items which were so useful against the vengeful souls were created by none other than him. In fact, he had already been placed onto the Wildlands execution list, and was in the top 100. All the people above him on the list were incredibly famous individuals who the Wildlands hated deeply. It couldn't be stated that Bai Xiaochun had completely changed the course of the war. A few exploding furnaces couldn't do something like that. However, he had influenced the state of battle, and that effect continued to grow as time passed. Furthermore, the chiefs of the savage tribes, as well as the necromancers, all hated him with a vengeance. The chiefs mourned those who had been lost among their various tribes, and the necromancers, who were a proud and lofty lot, were now forced to spend almost all their time keeping the vengeful souls under control. Generally speaking, controlling these souls should have involved simply directing their momentum. After all, the souls which poured directly out of the underworld river were particularly fierce. But now, the threat of the exploding furnaces made the souls very difficult to control. Some of them tried to flee, and others even tried to fight back against those controlling them. Currently, a meeting was taking place on the vast plain with the more than 1,000 black stones. Surrounding the black-robed old man on the floating black altar were 10 figures. All of them wore grey robes, and emanated terrifying fluctuations which identified them as none other than necromancers. One of them was speaking to the old man in a raspy voice. "Exalted emissary, we can't keep going on like this. We have to do something to resolve the situation." In addition to the necromancers, there were also 10 giants on the altar, all of whom seemed extremely ancient. They looked different from the other giants, larger and far more intelligent. One of those ancient giants looked at the black-robed old man and slowly said, "I agree, exalted emissary. If things keep going on like this, the warriors of our tribe will lose the protection offered by the tide of souls. Without that protection, they're no match for the cultivators on the wall. Exalted emissary, please use your divine abilities to put an end to this catastrophe." Considering what the necromancers and the tribal chiefs were saying, the old man thought for a moment, and then responded in a sinister voice, "We can't waste too much soul power before the appointed time. However, don't worry. I've already made some preparations, and I think the time is right to make a move. Pay close attention to the battle tomorrow. I'm going to make Bai Xiaochun's pill furnaces a thing of the past." Bai Xiaochun was sitting cross-legged inside Great Wall City, feeling very uneasy, although he wasn't sure why. Suddenly, his eyes snapped open, and he looked around with a strange expression on his face. However, after a moment passed, nothing happened, so he went back to cultivation. Eventually, when the sun was setting, he finally let out a long breath and then emerged from his residence. Clearing his throat, he said, "Bring the furnaces over." Instantly, Lu Li, Zhao Long, and the rest of his squad all sprang into action and began setting up 50 pill furnaces in a circle around him. By now, they had grown used to Bai Xiaochun's ways, and how famous he had become now that he was on the Wildlands execution list. At the same time, he had treated them well, bestowing medicinal pills and magical items upon them frequently. After all, despite not having a huge accumulation of battle credit, he did get more and more on a daily basis, and was not the stingy type. He wanted everyone around him to be just as happy as he was. Therefore, Zhao Long and the others didn't mind being ordered around. After setting up the pill furnaces, they took their places to stand guard. After things were set up, Bai Xiaochun nodded in satisfaction. Waving his hand, he opened all of the pill furnaces, and then sent large quantities of medicinal plants flying out. As was his usual custom, he made unique adjustments to all 50 of the medicine formulas. The pill furnaces began to heat up, whereupon Bai Xiaochun began to walk amongst them, occasionally adding ingredients to a furnace here, or adjusting the heat to a furnace there. After about 2 hours had passed, all the proper adjustments had been made, and he began to seal the furnaces. As Bai Xiaochun sealed pill furnaces, Zhao Long and the others exchanged glances, and then began to whisper among themselves. "I wonder how many will explode this time. I bet it will be 20 or less. Yesterday, 17 blew up, so I bet that it will be more than 20 today." This was how things usually went. After sealing all of the furnaces, Bai Xiaochun brushed off his hands and walked back into his residence, paying the furnaces no more heed. Another 8 hours passed, after which one of the pill furnaces began to emit cracking sounds. As usual, Bai Lin showed up, whereupon Bai Xiaochun ended his session of cultivation and walked out to meet him. "Thank you for your hard work, Grandmaster Bai," Bai Lin said with a smile. He viewed Bai Xiaochun more favorably with each day that passed. "It's no trouble at all," Bai Xiaochun replied grandly, looking very much like an important hero. "I do everything for the Great Wall. However, I have to say, old Bai, I'm almost out of pill furnaces and am running very low on medicinal plants, especially earth spirit tubers. Next time, bring a few more than usual." "No problem. I'll handle it right away." Bai Lin continued to watch the furnaces with sparkling eyes until more cracking sounds began to ring out. With every pill furnace that began to show signs of exploding, Bai Lin would get more excited. Furthermore, in order to ensure that they would all explode at the same time, he would often draw upon the power of his cultivation base to suppress the more unstable ones. Eventually, when 27 pill furnaces were on the verge of exploding, and the others clearly weren't, Bai Lin laughed heartily, flicked his sleeve, and shot toward the Great Wall with the furnaces. As usual, Bai Xiaochun flew along behind him to see what would happen on the battlefield. After all, such direct observations of the exploding furnaces helped a lot when it came to adjusting his medicine formulas. Bai Lin knew that Bai Xiaochun liked to watch the explosions personally, so he flew slow enough that he could follow along. When they both reached the Great Wall, Bai Lin flung the 27 furnaces out in 27 different directions. When the cultivators of the 5 legions saw what was happening, they began to cheer in support. In contrast, the savages down on the battlefield gritted their teeth and began to back up. As for the vengeful souls, once the pill furnaces appeared, they became almost impossible for the necromancers to control, and instinctively began to scatter. The mere sight of what was happening before the pill furnaces detonated left Bai Xiaochun feeling quite wonderful. However, even as the savages and souls began to flee, a dozen or so sphere-shaped beasts suddenly flew out onto the battlefield. They moved with incredible speed, and at the same time, expanded rapidly, becoming a dozen 30-meter-tall spheroids that shot toward the incoming pill furnaces. As they closed in, the spheroid beasts opened their mouths wide. Next, intense sucking sounds could be heard as the pill furnaces were suddenly wrenched in their direction. The unexpected development occurred so quickly that before anyone on the Great Wall had a chance to react, the spheroid beasts had gobbled up all of the pill furnaces. Moments later, muffled thuds could be heard from inside them. The creatures bulged, and their eyes went wide, but after a moment, nothing else happened, and they actually just closed their eyes again. Then, they slowly deflated, returning to their original size. Finally, they opened their mouths and burped out wisps of black smoke, which slowly faded away in the wind. The entire battlefield went silent. The cultivators on the wall looked on with wide eyes, and Bai Lin stood there trembling, the killing intent in his eyes rising rapidly. The dozen spheroid beasts were all surrounded by rippling distortions that indicated that they were under the protection of powerful guardians. If Bai Lin personally went out to try to deal with him, he would be in great danger, and the rest of the forces on the wall would be forced to decide whether or not to come out to aid him. Damn it, Bai Lin growled, the killing intent in his eyes growing stronger. By this point, he had come to understand that the Wildlanders' goal in this entire campaign was to get Diva Patriarch Chen Hichan to come out of the city. If that happened, a trap would likely be sprung in an attempt to kill him. I never could have guessed that they would come up with a way to deal with the pill furnaces in less than half a year. Those weird beasts have obviously been mutated recently. Even as Bai Lin sighed darkly, the savages outside the wall began to cackle madly. As for the vengeful souls, their murderous auras grew even more intense, and they once again began to charge across the battlefield. This time, the charge was made with more intense violence than before. Booms instantly rang out, along with miserable screams. The cultivators of the 5 legions could do little more than steel themselves and once again fight to defend the Great Wall. As of this moment, few people were paying any attention at all to Bai Xiaochun. Everyone knew that his exploding pill furnaces had been rendered useless. To see the pill furnaces that he had so painstakingly prepared for detonation be consumed just like that first left Bai Xiaochun staring in mute shock. It was almost as if his mind had been smashed with a sledgehammer. How could this be happening? What kind of beasts are those? He felt as if his heart were in physical pain. No more battle credit? No more medicinal plants? No more pill furnaces? And on top of it all, I wasted a whole bunch of time and energy on concocting medicine. Bai Xiaochun let out a bellow of anger, his eyes completely bloodshot. At the moment, he felt like someone had just ruined his life. Without battle credit income like he had before, his dreams of being promoted to captain would be completely dashed. When he thought of that, his anger grew even hotter. Furthermore, having his pill furnaces destroyed right in front of all the other cultivators was like a slap to the face, and was a severe blow to his self-esteem. As he stood there glaring at the spheroid beasts, he felt like he had just fallen out of the sky and slammed into the earth. You just wait. How dare you consume Bai Xiaochun's pill furnaces? I'm gonna make you regret it. Rage burning, he spun and shot back to the armory. As for Bai Lin, he saw Bai Xiaochun's reaction inside. Bai Lin knew that it wouldn't be long before all of the savage tribes in the wildlands would have those same spheroid beasts, which had obviously been specifically designed to deal with Bai Xiaochun's pill furnaces. Before long, Bai Xiaochun was back in the armory and walking into his courtyard residence. How dare you consume my pill furnaces? How dare you destroy my medicinal pills? Challenging me, huh? Trifling little beasts. With the snap of a finger, Bai Xiaochun will reduce all of you to ashes. Zhao Long, Lu Li, all of you stand guard, and don't let anyone inside. I'm going into secluded meditation. Waving his arm, he dragged 8 pill furnaces with him into his personal residence, slamming the door shut behind him with a bang. Zhao Long and the others gasped, unsure of what had happened. None of them had ever seen Bai Xiaochun like this. What's going on? As they exchanged awkward glances, uneasy feelings rose up in their hearts. As Bai Xiaochun settled down cross-legged in his residence, he had a fierce expression on his face, and his eyes were so wide that all of the veins were visible, and they seemed like they were on fire. Waving his hand, he produced an earth flame crystal and settled one of the pill furnaces in front of him. I can't believe you made me lose face in front of all those cultivators. Damn it, Bai Xiaochun is afraid of a lot of things in heaven and earth, but he's not afraid of beasts like you. Waving his sleeve, he sent a huge pile of medicinal plants flying into the pill furnace. I refuse to believe that I can't mop the floor with those big-bellied beasts. How dare they consume my pill furnaces and destroy my medicinal pills? It's bad enough they wrecked my battle credit income, but they also had to discredit me. They're intentionally embarrassing me. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got, and at the same time, he began to concoct medicine as if he were bedeviled. It had been a long time since he had sunk into a state like this. His hands almost blurred, and rumbling echoed out from the pill furnace. Soon, the medicinal liquid in the furnace began to form, and a strong medicinal aroma spread out. 3 days passed by in a flash, during which time Bai Xiaochun never stepped out of his residence. Instead, he remained inside, concocting medicine, and occasionally letting out peals of maniacal laughter. How dare you provoke me? I'm gonna show you once and for all how awesome Bai Xiaochun is. HMMMPH. This medicinal pill isn't strong enough yet. Just wait, you trifling beasts, you just wait. When Zhao Long, Lu Li, and the others heard his laughter, they gasped in fear at the strange state that he was in. By this point, they had heard about what occurred outside the Great Wall a few days before, that the savages had used some strange, spheroid beasts to consume Bai Xiaochun's pill furnaces. At that point, they understood why he'd come back so angry. Is he really that mad just because they figured out how to stop his pill furnaces? Another half a day went by. On the evening of the third day, Bai Xiaochun's door slammed open, and he stepped out, thin, emaciated, and his hair completely disheveled. Zhao Long, go tell Bai Lin that I need sky thicket leaf, female beast musk, male beast bones, earth dragon root. In one breath, Bai Xiaochun rattled of several dozen types of medicinal plants. And I need them today. With that, he walked back into his residence and slammed the door. Zhao Long was starting to get nervous. For some reason, this version of Bai Xiaochun seemed very dangerous. As soon as Bai Xiaochun walked back into his residence, Zhao Long hurried off to find General Bai Lin, and before long, the medicinal plants Bai Xiaochun had requested were delivered. Zhao Long cautiously knocked on Bai Xiaochun's door, which opened as Bai Xiaochun reached out to grab the medicinal plants. Through the crack of the opened door, Zhao Long was just able to make out a cloud of swirling pink smoke. As for Bai Xiaochun, he looked haggard and thin, with a terrifying, demonic gleam in his eyes. Another 2 days passed. For some time now, a huge vortex had filled the sky because of the tampering with the underworld river, but for some reason it was now obscured with clouds that were filled with bolts of crackling lightning. Then, without any warning, large amounts of lightning suddenly began to descend upon the armory. Rumbling sounds could be heard as the armory's spell formation activated. At the same time, Bai Xiaochun's hoarse laughter could be heard filling the air. The combination of all the sights and sounds immediately caused Zhao Long and the other guards to look around in alarm. What's going on? What's happening? Simultaneously, wisps of smoke were beginning to seep out from the cracks and crevices in the corners of Bai Xiaochun's residence building. In the blink of an eye, they filled the area, and from the way they were moving, they almost seemed intelligent, like a whole group of tiny snakes. Zhao Long and the rest of the guards began to edge away in fear. If that were all there were to it, it might not be a big deal, and yet, as soon as the smoke appeared in the armory, vast quantities of ants suddenly rushed out into the open and began fleeing in the opposite direction. Ants weren't a very common sight in Great Wall City, but at the moment, they carpeted the ground. Before any of the guards could react, the entire armory was thrown into a commotion. What's causing this? Heavens! There's thunder and smoke and ants. Something big is going on, but what? Considering what was happening in the armory, other cultivators in the 5 legions were devolving into a commotion. Furthermore, the savages outside of the Great Wall could see the strange lightning, and were wondering what terrifying item had appeared inside of Great Wall City. As everyone reeled in shock, and as the heavens rumbled with thunder, a lightning bolt that seemed to be composed of countless other lightning bolts put together slammed down onto the armory, piercing through its spell formation shield and landing onto Bai Xiaochun's residence. The ground quaked, and the entire residence shook as much of it was destroyed. Zhao Long and the other guards backed up in terror, gasping the entire time. What kind of medicine is Grandmaster Bai concocting? Meanwhile, what could only be described as crazed laughter rang out from the wreckage of Bai Xiaochun's residence. Still not good enough. Zhao Long, go get me 3,000 portions of the same set of ingredients I had you get last time. A tremor ran through Zhao Long as he looked at the mostly destroyed residence, and the increasingly thick smoke emanating from it. It caused a sensation of intense danger to fill his heart. Swallowing hard, he looked over at the other guards, and could see how ashen their faces were. Thoroughly bewildered by what was happening, he gritted his teeth and hurried off. When he returned, Bai Lin was with him. When Bai Lin saw the wreckage and the terrifying pink smoke, he looked up at the thunderclouds in the sky, and called out, Xiaochun, there's no need to be impulsive about the, leave me alone, they're just a few beasts, right? I have tens of thousands of ways of dealing with stupid-ass beasts like that. Just wait and see. A long moment passed, and then Bai Xiaochun spoke again. Zhao Long, throw those medicinal plants over here. Zhao Long didn't dare to refuse. After glancing at Bai Lin and getting confirmation, he tossed a bag of holding into the pink smoke. A bit of time passed in which Bai Lin considered trying to do more to convince Bai Xiaochun to stop. However, that was when rumbling sounds could be heard inside the smoke, which suddenly transformed from pink to red. At the same time, more bolts of lightning began to fall from above. Shockingly, even as the first round of lightning fell, more lightning could be seen converging higher up. In the blink of an eye, fully 10,000 lightning bolts merged together into something like a net that covered the entire sky. Even Bai Lin gasped at the sight of it, let alone the other ordinary cultivators in Great Wall City. Even the charging Wildlands army suddenly stopped in place to look at what was happening. As for the beasts in the army, they were suddenly stricken by very uneasy feelings. Some of them even began to pant and look over toward Great Wall City with red, glowing eyes, as if they were being stimulated into madness. Bai Lin was suddenly stricken by a very ominous feeling when he saw the smoke turn red. There was something terrifying about it, something that didn't have anything to do with one's cultivation base, but rather, with some other, deeper instinct. Xiaochun, don't get too worked up. I'm working on a way to deal with those spheroid beasts. You just, don't even try to convince me, came the growling interruption. Bai Xiaochun, will definitely show those beasts that Lord Bai's pill furnaces are not that delicious after all. Inside the residence, Bai Xiaochun was sitting right in front of 8 crimson hot pill furnaces, his hair disheveled, his face gaunt, surrounded by large quantities of medicine bottles. He had gone crazy in his pill concocting, relying completely on spirit alcohol to sustain his cultivation base, as well as numerous special medicinal pills. By this point, it was correct to say that Bai Xiaochun had gone all out. With a shout, he slapped his hands onto the surface of each of the violently shaking pill furnaces. Cracks spread out across their surfaces, whereupon intense gravitational forces sprang up. At the same time, the red smoke stirred, instantly rushing into the 8 pill furnaces. As soon as the smoke vanished, Bai Xiaochun appeared in front of Bai Lin and the others. A bright gleam flickered in his eyes as he threw his head back and laughed at the top of his lungs. Trifling big-bellied beasts. I, Bai Xiaochun, have prepared a wonderful gift for you. Let's see if you ever dare to consume my things again. I used several thousand sets of supreme-grade ingredients, and even cleansed the impurities with tens of thousands of bolts of lightning. Then I purified the medicine again with a secret magic, and then went so far as to ruin the pill furnaces to refine them a third time. The result is something paramount, something unparalleled in heaven and earth, something that affects both male and female beasts. A single whiff of it will drive them crazy to the point of insanity. It is an aphrodisiac pill to shock all creation. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.